Mr. Hargraves, it is nice to meet you and to have this opportunity to ask you some questions. You have spent many years studying education systems and helping them. Most systems are trying to improve the quality of learning of their students. They also are trying to improve the equity in education. But many systems are not very successful in this. Only some education systems succeeded, like Finland, Estonia, or Canada. You have gathered some evidence that the improvement doesn't depend only on the Ministry of Education. It also depends on something that you call the middle of the system. And the first question is, how do you define the middle?
First of all, I want to say how delighted I am to be able to work with Czech educators and Czech Republic policymakers at a critical time in the coronavirus crisis, which is helping us think hard not only about how to manage the crisis, but what our schools should be like when we come out the other side of this crisis. Should they be just like they were before, or can we be better because of this from what we've learned about how we deal with this particular problem? And one way to think about that is to look at this idea that is really beginning to move around the world called leading from the middle. What do we mean by that? Well, usually in the English language, when we use the term middle, it means something negative or weak. It means the middle is middle age or middle child or middle school. The Swedes even have a term called middle milk. By the way, this is not true in Asian cultures where middle is very strong. Middle is seen as the best place you can be, not the worst place. So first I'd want you to not think about the middle just as a connector for two things that are more important, the beginning and the end, or the top and the bottom. The middle is something that has not only great value in its own right, but in some ways is the strongest part of the system. So think of the middle as the center, the core, the heart of the organization, of the people who are closest to practice and closest to improving the quality of practice wherever you are. In a school, the middle is your teacher leaders. It is your heads of department, your heads of year, the people responsible for innovation or improvement, for example. In a municipality, the middle is probably your schools and how your schools work together. Maybe your primary schools, your secondary schools, perhaps a combination. And in a country, the middle, if you have school districts or municipalities, and I know you have many in the Czech Republic, the middle is really how do you cluster those municipalities together in groups by region, by type, by interest, by focus, so that they can start to help and support each other. The middle is about building collective responsibility amongst the leaders closer to the practice, so that success becomes possible for everybody to the same degree, no matter which school they are in, which neighborhood they live, or which town or region is their residence.
My second question. What are the main responsibilities of the middle, and which of them are most important for the quality of students' learning?
The first obvious responsibility is, of course, learning. Learning that leads to achievement and to success. It's what we all think schools are officially supposed to be about. It's something that we've discovered during the coronavirus, that mainly schools can do better than parents and homes can. So we've been reminded how important schools are for learning, how important the expertise of teachers is in enhancing students' learning, and sometimes how technology can assist in terms of expanding and enriching that learning. So the first thing is to improve learning, to use the expertise of the teachers, the collective expertise of the teachers to improve learning. The second, of course, is well-being. And if there is anything that this coronavirus has really reminded us of, it is that well-being is not an add-on or a luxury or an afterthought. That if students are not physically well, if they are not emotionally well, if they have stress or post-traumatic issues or deep problems in their families, if they have no one to care for them, if they have no friends to interact with, then learning will be very, very hard for them. So the second thing we've learned and really elevated in priority is the fact that schools are places where children go to be cared for by other adults as well as their parents, and to be part of a community of friends with people who like them, who interact with them, and a place where they learn to get along in the community and get along with friends as well. So well-being is the second in addition to learning. The third, which is crucial for leading from the middle, is that everybody enjoys these benefits equally. Everybody enjoys these benefits to the same degree. That doesn't mean we treat everybody in the same way. Some children have higher needs than others. They may have learning difficulties. They may have emotional problems. They may suffer from poverty or disadvantage. These things tend to be clustered by residents very often. So sometimes within a town, we'll have rich and poor families in the same place, but often we don't. We tend to have wealthier districts and poorer districts. So when we have leading from the middle, we can energize and activate the capacities of our teachers and leaders across different localities to help each other with their strategies, to help each other succeed, to take collective responsibility for success. So leading from the middle is about learning. It is also, don't forget, about well-being. It is creating equity, not just despite the differences, but also because of the positive differences that exist between different localities. And it builds the collective capacity, what Michael Fullan and I have called the professional capital of teachers and of leaders across districts, that is greater than the capacity that people have in any particular district.
Can you share with us some concrete, specific examples of good practice of this middle in this situation?
There are a number of good examples of leading from the middle. The very term itself first came from work that we did in Ontario, Canada, where the government, the provincial government, wanted a new special education strategy that was based on principles of what we call inclusion or universal design. That means that you design a curriculum, you design a lesson, you design a pedagogy so that the maximum number of people can gain access from that, even though they might have special needs or a different language or a different ethnocultural background or come from poverty or whatever particular issue it is that they are struggling with. And the government realized fairly quickly that unlike, say, literacy or math strategy, they couldn't really dictate this and prescribe it in detail from the top. It's too complicated. In Canada, many of our districts are quite different. There are many immigrants. Some are quite affluent. Some are very rural with rural poverty, for example. So every district's different, and therefore you can't have one strategy that fits everybody with a policy like inclusion. So the decision was really made to give discretion to the districts to respond to the diversity that they saw in their own localities. 72 districts across about 13 million people, 5,000 schools. But the government also realized that if every district was left to its own devices, that might actually create exclusion rather than inclusion, because some would be more advantaged than others. So they allocated funds of $25 million in the first instance to really create a structure or a system, which has to be deliberate. It can't just be encouragement, to bring those districts together to collaborate in designing general principles of inclusion, to share their strategies of inclusion, to display and be transparent about the strategies that they were developing, and to learn from each other. For instance, how to use technology, how to develop self-advocacy among students with special needs for the things that would help them learn more successfully. So Ontario, I think, is one. And then what we've done is taken, in a way, some of what we've learned from Ontario, which they devised, not us. This was really not our strategy. It was their strategy, to places like Scotland and Wales in the United Kingdom. There, I've been working with Scotland now for about 5 years as one of a group of advisors. They have 32 districts. And there are inequities between those districts. And not all the inequities are to do with wealth and poverty. Sometimes they're simply to do with efficiency or effectiveness of leadership. And so we've grouped those districts into about 6 clusters, 6 regional clusters. They're called regional education collaboratives. And the job of those districts is to help each other improve equity over time and reduce achievement gaps. It is to each of them to take responsibility for one area in which they are strong. It might be maths, it might be well-being, it might be special educational needs, and for them then to have an advisor who is assigned to them, somebody called a challenge advisor, whose job is to support them, to bring them together, but also to challenge, to stretch them, to push them, to keep them focused over time. And of course, it's hard to disentangle the results of this strategy from all the other strategies that Scottish Government is using, things like literacy improvement, improved teacher education, and so on. If you look at the last round of PISA, for example, the international PISA results on student assessment, Scotland was one of the most rapidly accelerating systems of improvement out of all the OECD countries, and improved more rapidly certainly than England. And we could say to some extent the same is also true of Wales, which we've been supporting, where they have 13 different districts, been having them work together in the same kind of way. So there are many different ways of doing this. There isn't one strategy. The point is for municipalities to work together, to maximize positive variation, where there are differences of approach depending on your community, but minimize negative variation in terms of quality and effectiveness, and have a deliberate design that will encourage, support, and push districts to work collaboratively with each other to enhance each other's success over time and narrow the gaps that exist between them.
Thank you very much. When I was listening to you, one more question came to my mind. Do we have some time for the last question, which wasn't written before? The question is, well, we in my country, in Czech Republic, want to build a stronger middle, as you have described it, but we are at the beginning of this process. The question is, which people are well qualified or are for building this middle layer and for realizing these functions of the middle layer? Is it teachers, well-experienced teachers, best headmasters, someone else?
So first, the point of having a strong middle is not to have a weak top. Actually, the top needs to be even stronger. If we look at the coronavirus, for example, where have been some of the best systems? They've been where leaders at the top have been decisive, where they've acted early, where they've been influenced not by politics but by expertise and evidence and knowledge, where they've been quite open with their populations, where they've had a vision of how they're going to approach this, but a humility about the fact that they don't know everything every day about the best way to proceed, and they show empathy for the people that they are working with. If we look at places like New Zealand, Denmark, most of them women leaders, by the way, which is interesting, but also Canada to some degree. These are the strategies which leaders at the top, they inspire, they're decisive, they have high expectations, they show empathy, and they believe in the leadership of other people to carry forward this vision over time in a context of high trust. Collaboration is most effective when you're on your own. So if you collaborate effectively with other people, you should be better when you're on your own, because you can be trusted to do the right thing, and because you have been given high capacity to exercise your judgment effectively. So these are all the things that leaders at the top can do. Then we must build leadership capacity or leadership capital throughout the system. So the leaders of municipalities and so on, what processes do you have in your country, I would ask, to develop system leadership amongst those leaders so that they have exactly everything that I've described, but within the context of their own municipality. They can convey trust, they are decisive, they can inspire, they are open, they value expertise, and they actively seek out ideas and thoughts from other systems, and are prepared to give and offer things to other systems at the same time, and take that message and turn it to a school principal and a school leader, and it's exactly the same. So what capacities do you build in school leaders to be decisive, focused, collaborative, inspirational, open, and to value expertise? All the way through, you need a very clear strategy to build people's individual leadership capacities that include collaboration, and very clear designs that bring people together to focus on equity, improvement, and achievement and well-being. So it's about a culture of leadership and a structure of improvement, working effectively together, inspired and guided by the top, but activated by the people in the middle.
Thank you very much for this interview.